Hey there, I'm Lynn, Senior Maintainer Advocate here at TyLib, and I want to welcome you to 5 Minute Maintainers, where we introduce you to open source maintainers who contribute to the software you depend on. We'll ask 5 big questions in 5 minutes and are always open to suggestions for questions on our community at community.tylib.com. I have Seth with me today. I'll let Seth introduce himself in questions. So, Seth, my first question, of course, is who are you? Tell us about yourself and the projects you maintain.
So I'm Seth Larson. I live in Minnesota in the United States. I'm a principal software engineer at Elastic, and I'm currently working on language clients there. I'm a Python Software Foundation Fellow, and I maintain urlib3, which is the most downloaded Python package on the Python Package Index, and a couple other projects like Requests and TrustStore, and a few others that are just in like the networking and security space.
That's amazing, Seth. Thank you so much. How did you get started with open source?
Yeah, it's a funny story. So I went to the University of Minnesota, and that's actually I learned Python in like the 101 programming course. And there is also where I was exposed to GitHub. And so after I graduated, I kind of just started playing around, toying around with different things about like networking and all of that. And I had an early interaction with Corey Benfield, who was previously a maintainer of urlib3. And he was kind of the person that brought me into the, hey, doing open source more than just kind of playing around with it. That whole story started there. So
That's so cool how everyone gets started with open source. There's so many different pathways, but that first introduction is always pretty magical. Thank you for that. My next question is, what do you think about the state of open source today?
it's all over the place. Organizations are kind of waking up is kind of the way that I like to describe it. And they just keep on realizing, not that this is a new thing at this point, but it's just continuing to happen where there's this realization that, wow, we depend a ton on open source software, like how much of our digital infrastructure is built on open source software. And it's just like manifests in so many different ways. So like we're seeing government involvement, we see funding, we see like interest in what your dependencies even are. We see all of these new standards about security posture and vulnerability management and processes around all of the security, and it just continues to manifest, and I don't see it stopping anytime soon. And so it's just going to keep on getting more and more interest, more and more realization, and yeah, it's an exciting time, honestly, having this more broader interest, not just people who are enthusiasts or people that are direct users of open source, to think about it and to know more about it than just, oh, this is where we get software. There's more to it than that. And so having that broad knowledge about open source is a really exciting place to be in, at least in my opinion.
I totally agree. And I think there's so many things changing. Thank you for touching on that. Leading into that, what do you think about the increase of cybersecurity standards that open source projects should adhere to?
Yeah, so this is an interesting one just because there are people behind all of this, mostly volunteers. Some people are paid, which is nice. But the increase in standards, one thing that I see being different about this kind of round, I don't want to say round necessarily, but this kind of new increase in interest in security standards is that the teams that are building them are folks that have participated a lot in the ecosystem, the open source ecosystems. So that's really exciting. And so because of that, there's a lot of input into the user experience, into how are we going to roll this out? How are we going to combine this with additional support? So like financial support or resources, or, hey, we'll do the work for you. All you have to do is be okay with it. Like there's just so many parts of it that I think are being handled so much better than previous in the past. So like for an example is like PGP or GPG, I can never remember, signing of commits or signing of artifacts and all of that. And like that was a really, unfortunately designed process. And so a lot of people just ended up not doing it. And so like people are realizing that with all of these new standards, that usability is like the number one thing. Like obviously it has to work, but then you also have to have people actually do that. So it's important to make it as easy as possible so that people who are volunteering their time can opt in and start doing these and taking advantage and deriving value from them immediately rather than it being this huge barrier to entry.
Absolutely. That access is important. Thank you for that, Seth. My last question for you is what has helped you on your journey in open source? And do you have any resources that folks watching can follow?
Yeah. So for me, it's less about the tech, at least in terms of like my journey, especially where I am right now. It's a lot more about interpersonal skills. I think that they're undervalued in open source, and I mean just in tech in general. So things like knowing how to act and like think in with a collective mindset, knowing how to motivate others and keep volunteers engaged. I mean, all of these people, 99% of the people that you interact with on open source are not getting paid. They're not being forced to do this. They're doing this for a very wide range of reasons, but almost always they're intrinsically motivated rather than extrinsically motivated. And so knowing how to work within all of those individuals' frameworks is like super important. And then stuff like writing. Like a couple of years ago, just decided that I really wanted to be better at writing. And so I spent like some real effort just reading about how to write better and how to write better technical like works. And then like setting goals for yourself about like, oh, I'm going to publish 12 blogs in a year. And I'm just going to do that. And whatever it takes, and you're going to review them and you're going to send them to people to review, and you're going to like try your best to make them as nice as possible, and you don't care about the outcome. It's all about self-betterment. I think that focusing on those skills are like super important, because I think that there's an over focus on the actual like code side of it, or the, you know, yeah, the technical side of it, which is just that part is like almost a guarantee, right? Like it's going to happen. If it's about software, software is going to be written, but let's focus on all these other parts that are like super important, especially for maintaining a project or managing a project. I think that those skills, especially if you're trying to become more of a maintainer rather than a contributor, not saying that it's not important for a contributor, but for a maintainer especially, those sorts of skills are like critical.
Thank you so much, Seth, for all of your knowledge and sharing your journey with us. If you'd like to watch more of our Meet the Maintainers series, check out our YouTube channel or visit the Tidelib community. Take care.